Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on this Aura Talks video. Today we're talking about a very important subject, the subject of secession from the Australian government for Western Australia. And joining me today is one of the co-authors, Julian Gillespie. Julian, thank you so much for joining us on this video. Before I get into this too much, I'd really like to hear a little bit about your background, because you're a very qualified man in this subject matter, legally. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the other very interesting people that have been involved to co-author this?
Okay, yes. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all, Andrew.
Thank you.
And Pip, who's behind the camera with us, Pip Clayton. So, look, the other people who are involved in this are Professor G.G. Foster of the University of New South Wales, senior economist Michael Baker, and also Professor Ian Brighthope. And I got to know G.G. and Ian quite well in the early years of COVID. That would have been it was in early 2022. We all spoke at a conference which was hosted and arranged by AMST, Australian Medical Professionals Society. And that became an enduring friendship, colleagues really, because we were all, with our sleeves rolled up in the COVID, well, we call it a fight because it was a fight. Mm-hmm. And so everyone had their roles to play, and Gigi, of course, was one of the first out of the gate with her book about the lockdowns in Australia just being completely wrong. They lacked any scientific evidence whatsoever. And then, of course, Professor Ian Brighthope was lobbying the government hard directly, the health ministers, trying to point out to them that the very worst possible actions they could take would be lockdowns. And then it obviously moved into the whole COVID vaccine issue as well. And yet at the end of the day, we already were aware in those early days that we were dealing with something that was a novel virus, there's no question about it, but its symptomology was no worse than a severe flu. Mm. And so we had to deal with all this mandating issue around the country for a drug that was completely untested. And as we subsequently, anyone who's been following our legal, our work, because we brought 3 successive proceedings, 2 in the federal court and 1 in the high court, these products, for a range of faults that they just inherently had for being rushed to market, were just contaminated with synthetic genetic material. So all our worst fears were ultimately realised. But the greatest threat coming out of that period, because all of the heat sort of gone out of COVID these days, the greatest threat in retrospect to the Australian people throughout those years was in fact the Commonwealth government. Mm. They actually caused more deaths and injuries and long-term financial problems for millions of Australians. And then there's also the mental health issues which impacted particularly harshly young people and people of lower socio-economic means. And so the outfall's just been incredible. It's like it wasn't SARS-CoV-2, it was actually the Commonwealth Government of Australia that hurt Australia more than anybody else. Now, as people who have followed all of our efforts, not just Gigi, it's not Ian and not me, there was a whole bunch of us across the country and in Western Australia too, who were seeking and who were pushing back vigorously. Everything was falling on deaf ears, both at a state level and at a federal level. We understand why the states didn't react. Of course, they were essentially bribed with billions of dollars by the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, people don't have direct jurisdiction over health, but they provided incredible financial incentives, which state so-called leaders at the time took that money. Where it all went is another question, but they took that money and enforced just draconian measures. And I mean, Rebecca Barnett, who we'll probably mention more later, coined a beautiful term, with her Substack dystopian down under, and when it comes to Western Australia, I think she called it the Hermit Kingdom. which was just so appropriate. The isolation, if Perth and Western Australia isn't isolated enough, well, COVID just made it the place on earth that anyone could actually access or get out of. And so, yeah, coming out of that, it was clear that the Commonwealth government has evolved into a threatening entity in its own right. And my coming into 2024, we were also responsible for spearheading, providing submissions for terms of reference for a COVID Royal Commission, something which our really disgusting present leader, Albanese, bopped on the head and formulated his own Prime Minister's Office inquiry, which was just a joke, a whitewash. But coming out of providing those submissions to the Senate and seeing that no one was being taken seriously, and we put together 760 pages of medical expert and scientific evidence for that. My question was, well, how can the Commonwealth be stopped from doing this again? Because they essentially got away with it.
Yeah.
They essentially got away with it. And they refused to listen to anyone. And that's where my back really got up. It's like, hold on. They're servants of the people. They are servants of the people. Public servants. And that's a very real thing at law. There's no question that they are servants of the people. They're servants of the taxpayers. Yet when the general population push back on the mandates, the lockdowns, they won't listen to. Same people that voted those two successive governments into office. And then when the people with the great expertise, the G.G. Fosses, the Ian Brighthopes, and all the other experts, professors out there who were just providing these beautiful submissions as to don't do this for this reason, don't do that for this reason. And we're seeing these deaths and being completely blown off by a servant. A servant was essentially flipping the bird to their employers, that is the Australian people.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see how could we stop this thing occurring again. And I was just drawn to WA to begin. It was 18 months of research and travelling this state up and down twice. I've gone into all the desert regions and I've stayed in the desert towns and spent particular periods up in Port Hedland to understand what's going on in the northern part of the state. And it's clear, the upshot of that, it's clear that WA has for a long time, it's been nearly a century, been discussing the idea of secession, that entering the Commonwealth wasn't such a good idea. And those mumblings and rumblings were clear we're talking about 1901, 1902. This is the story they keep hushed up. Then there was a push for secession in 1930. And I've looked at the law again, and it's like, it can be done now. It's very, very easy to do it. This is how you stop the Commonwealth from ever imposing a COVID-type era upon Australians. Again, you just say, we're no longer a part of the Commonwealth. We're going it alone. We don't need you.
And I think I agree. Australians are ready for this. Right across Australia, people are fed up with the left-right paradigm that exists. I agree. There's never been a better time. So you've just mentioned the Federation in 1901 and why, well, the fact that people have been saying that it wasn't a good idea. Can you give me a few words around why it wasn't a good idea?
It wasn't long after Federation came into being, the Commonwealth came into existence, that the Commonwealth started to flex its muscle under the Constitution and started to see what it could get away with. And it was able to impose, with its new constitutional heads of power, as they're called in constitutional law, various taxes and imposts and excises and so forth. And so there started to become very early on an imbalance where WA had a financial burden placed upon it from Canberra, the other side of the country, and there was very, very little allowance made for the population differences and the needs of Western Australians. And so it became very clear in the very early years after the Commonwealth came into being that WA had made a wrong decision. And that's beautifully picked up in the second foreword in the new book by Professor William Coleman, because he's indeed written books on just that period of time in Western Australia. That is, what were the Western Australian leaders doing during the Federation conferences leading up to 1901? Were they being listened to? And they weren't. And they were ultimately strong-armed into agreeing to get behind the new constitution. And then within the first couple of years, it's very well recorded that the WA leaders at the time just regretted all their participation and in fact joining, but they couldn't. It was too late to back out immediately because there was enough of the population here. It was really the goldfields of WA, which were all from the East Coast. Let's be clear about that. Who were muffling him out, and so he couldn't say, "Let's quickly get out of this." So now that's evolved. Now it's where GST's paid here, and the figures roughly, WA only gets back 75 cents in the dollar on that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, hold on, you've been shortchanged, and it keeps on going on.
And it's a subject that keeps arising over time. It's been in the news quite a bit. So what in this idea of a new nation here in Western Australia, what's the legal pathway for that to occur?
Well, it's the broad term is just self-determination, popular sovereignty. There's several interchangeable terms which essentially for this idea boil down to the same thing, and it's just a group of people who are a part of some form of federation, federated model, and you see that up in Canberra, Canada, and of course America's another example of that. They've decided they no longer want to be a part of the partnership. Right? They thought there were perhaps good prospects going into it, but now they have decided, no, it's not working for us. If we go it alone, we as a people will be much better off. And that's what it boils down to. The law has changed in the nearly 100 years since there was a very first, very real concerted legal action in the early 1930s, which they took that up to Westminster in the UK because they believed they needed the UK Parliament to assist them to break away. Because Western Australians did, at a referendum, agree to secede in the early 1930s. The UK Parliament turned around and said, it's no longer our authority. We do not have legal authority there. You need to take it back and have a referendum under your constitution. Well, that's actually no longer required. And there's no national referendum required for WA to leave. WA citizens off their own back can just say, we're done with this partnership, we want to go it alone.
Right, so it's very real and it's very possible to do.
Yes.
So I think anyone who's potentially watching this video would be saying to themselves, okay, this sounds really interesting, what's in it for me? So what is the economic vision for this future West Australian nation?
Yeah. Okay. That's the $1 million question. Really, for the punters out there, why would I go to another state referendum and agree to this outcome? And it's really quite simple. The over 100 years since Federation, WA has discovered that it is full of the greatest riches on the planet. It's probably one of the most wealthiest plots of dirt on the globe. And Qatar went through a similar situation. It was literally just a desert with lots of Bedouin tribes, and you couldn't even grow anything. And then they discovered just a few short decades ago that they had all of this natural gas sitting underneath them, and now they are one of the most wealthy nations on the planet with an enormous sovereign wealth fund. Their population, I think, is only about 2 million people. It's a similar thing. WA has found that it's got all this iron ore as well as all these rare earths, as well as gas.
and gold.
And gold. And like the list just goes on and on.
Yes.
And so you move to secession, and that means WA becomes its own nation. Right? So it's the new nation, as we term it in the book, the new nation, new Western Australia. It no longer has any obligations towards the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is part of a foreign nation, which is right next door, begins at Northern Territory and South Australia. So there's no more dealing with Commonwealth taxes. They just disappear. There's 13 plus Commonwealth taxes, including income tax, which disappear. In the model, which is a blueprint, so it's subject to tweaks, it's very simple. With the major producers, miners in this state, there would be imposed what we call a universal royalty rate of 20% on the gross sales of their products. So iron ore, for instance. Going to secession means that the waters in the Northwest Shelf, as everyone knows, the Northwest Shelf with all the gas produced up there, those waters become part of the new nation. So all of those producers up there become part of the fiscal revenue model for the new nation. And so that 20% tax would be imposed upon them. That tax is enough to fund the needs of government, the services, the very, very basic services. And that's after cutting back the Western Australian government's administration somewhere in the vicinity of 50%, because there's so much fat and bloat that's there that's just not necessary. It becomes exceedingly affordable, but the upshot is there's so much money for the new nation to enjoy from that resource tax, which is what Qatar does and what Norway does, that no Western Australian will ever need to pay income tax again. No business will need to pay income tax again. You won't have to pay your annual regio on your car, which is actually the biggest budget revenue item in Western Australia.
Yeah.
There would be, the only taxes that we can see would be a very small GST tax and maintenance of what people understand to be the land rates tax, because local council still needs to run. Yeah. So immediately, you got the FIFO worker who's been taxed through the nose. He's losing 30, maybe 40%. I'm not sure what the highest rate is these days.
Yep.
Well,
that's me.
That stays in your pocket, Andrew.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's pretty exciting.
100% of what you earn, spending all that time up in the desert. Yep. When you get home, you got 100% in the dollar going into your bank account, and the only impact after that is for the GST, and you're already used to that.
Yes, and it economically makes sense to pay a goods and services tax, I think. Certainly love the idea that I wouldn't be paying income tax any longer. But look, you've already touched on this, and I'm just wondering whether you could expand on it a little bit. What happens to the existing bureaucracy in the state and local governments?
Well, it's a blueprint that we're presenting, and it's subject to further white papers to turn the dials and seek to optimise. But we were able to identify that as much as 60% of the current government bureaucracy, and we're talking at a state level, is just not required in a post-secession new nation for Western Australia. A lot of the bloat that you see in Western Australia at the moment is because of duplication as well, with these administrations that are talking to Canberra. And Canberra's the one who wants all that administration in WA, so it can keep on sucking the money out of it. So it wants its people here. Yeah. As soon as you go to secession and you've got no relationship with the Commonwealth, well, those departments just disappear. They've got absolutely no use. There's no need for them. There's no warrant for them whatsoever. The existing WA departments, a lot of those are just bloated because they've got departments which talk to the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And so when you've got whole swaths of people that no longer need to talk to the Commonwealth because there's no obligations there anymore, then the state departments get radically downsized.
Yeah.
And this isn't new.
And optimised.
Optimised, that's right. This isn't new. We referenced so many nations that went down this exact route and cut the fat. They cut the fat and got it as lean as they possibly could. And so we're talking about a situation, just so people know, back in the 1970s, the cost of government per Australian was something like $600
a year.
Per year, that's right.
Year.
Now we're in a situation that for each Australian, it's $29,000.
I was going to say it must be in the 10,000s. Yeah.
I was actually around in the 70s, and it's like we were all pretty goddamn happy, and we thought there was too much government in those days as well.
Yeah.
So let's just get back to basics. When you don't have a tax regime as well, you wipe out 99% of taxes, and the Commonwealth taxes disappear and the state taxes disappear. You've only got to administer GST. Local councils can deal with the land rates issue.
Yeah.
And you only need a small department dealing with the major miners to get that universal royalty rate or the resource tax from them. You don't need all this bureaucracy, and so it's very easy to downsize. And our best model is to reduce the entire state, inclusive of the Commonwealth departments that they integrate with, reduce them by 60%, and everything will still run beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Everything will still run beautifully. And to complement that, the shift would be to decentralise. So you don't put all these responsibilities in this government bureaucracy that sits just in Perth. You devolve it. So the local councils, they're responsible for the provision of a lot of this stuff. So you get it down to a local level because they know exactly what they need at a local level, as opposed from bureaucratic fat cats who tell people what they need up in this little town or that little town.
Yeah, yeah. And it creates a real cultural change as well, where I think we will suddenly start seeing certain communities really flourish and become really interesting to visit. And I mean, I've driven across America a couple of times, and again, putting the sort of the higher level aside, you come into these counties that are just so unique, and that's sort of what I'm envisaging listening to you speak. You've already mentioned it, but we're really talking about a new sovereignty, a new sovereign nation. That's a very, very deep subject. And I don't really want to get right into that right now, but we're then, in taking that on, we're then talking about generating self-reliance. What other things would need to be done to make ourselves self-reliant?
Yeah, okay. Well, WA has always been very, very good at creating overseas relationships to get what they need, what they haven't been able to produce here.
Yeah.
Very, very long history of being reliant on imports. So the state, even before it was a part of the Commonwealth, it was its own, if you like, sovereign colony, which was really only answerable to the UK. On sovereignty, just quickly, well, you move to post-secession WA, no longer has to speak to, clearly, the Commonwealth. It's like a foreign nation. And there's no relationship with the UK anymore, so it only needs to speak to itself. It is a wholly sovereign new nation. Now, in terms of surviving, well, sure, there's a border which begins, where Northern Territory's border currently is and where South Australia border is, and there's stuff that WA currently gets from the East Coast. It's business as usual.
Yep.
It's not like you put an iron curtain up.
That's right.
Or you all of a sudden you say, if you want to deliver your goods here, you've got to pay X amount in tariffs, or whatever. No, it'll be
We're not talking about that.
No, not at all. It's still business as usual, but we don't have the interference and, well, let's be blunt, the grifting, grafting Commonwealth government putting its hand into WA's purse all the time. It's just like, you cut out that guy, you cut out that middleman, and all those individual businesses that import stuff from the East Coast because they've got a market here in WA, sovereignty doesn't destroy that business relationship whatsoever. So that on a local level, it's business as usual.
Right.
There's just a border that the guys in the trucks have to go over. And it's like, I've got an Australian passport and they're coming into Western Australia, so they need to get their visas in order.
And I'm glad you said that. So just to be clear, we're not talking about coming up with a whole brand new name for the nation. It's still going to be Western Australia.
Yeah, look, I mucked around with some ideas. It's like, no, everyone's happy being called Western Australian.
Yeah, I think I am.
Sandgropers. This doesn't break up Australia. You can't break up Australia. Australia is one place. It's one landmass. It's a continent.
It's one people.
And it is the one people. It's just the governance structure. We're just taking
back control.
Taking back control. So there was a time when the Commonwealth never existed. Okay. And WA existed quite well without the Commonwealth, and they felt Australian with that colony of Queensland, that colony of New South Wales, that colony of Victoria. It gets back to that era, but everyone's growing up now.
I'm sure there's people out there watching this thinking, well, will there be a new currency?
Oh, yes.
What's the answer to that?
Well, there's no choice. We do have a chapter specifically on what's required, and it would require introducing a new currency. We've suggested a name called the Talent, Talent. It's an old name for a currency.
Okay.
We've brushstroked them. We did go into some detail, but we've pulled back a bit for the sake of the book. There would be a transition period where for instance, the first 12 months, Western Australia would use the Australian dollar, and then there would be legal requirements to transition into the Talent. How do you do that? Well, it's all about backing, and it's foreign reserved backing would be the initial period for about 5, maybe 10 years. When you've got so much resource revenue coming in for the fiscal model, and for instance, Rio, Fortescue, Hancock, their customers pay sometimes in Japanese yen or the Chinese renminbi and all the rest of it. Well, when those producers have to pay 20% of their sales to the central administration, that gets banked, right? And that foreign reserve is the backing for the new currency that it starts to issue. Anyway, it's in the book.
Kind of like the greenback.
No, let's not go.
Let's not go there.
Look, it's in the book, and it's beautifully explained, and it's when you read it, and it's accessible to all readers.
Yes.
This is the very purpose of the book. When you read it, you go, oh, that's pretty simple. Just a year transition, right? Just like Australia, went from the pound once and went into, the currency system that it does have now. It's a similar process. It's happened countless times around the world where you just change, the currency of your nation.
It's just a new name.
It's a new name. It's the same value, but because we would have the ability to also run our own new banking system, we built into this new currency all sorts of measures to do one thing straight out the gate, and that is make housing affordable.
Sure, a lot of things have become affordable. Look, you've touched quite a bit on the resources in this state, the big miners. What I'm sure that they will be a big part of the drive for this change. How does it look different for big companies?
Well, if they're a company that's incorporated in WA and their primary businesses in WA, they'll no longer be dealing with the Australian Commonwealth authorities.
So they'll be saving a lot.
Oh, they'll be saving extraordinary amounts. I mean, every business, up to the major miners, they're paying no income tax. They're paying no payroll tax. They're paying no capital gains.
Just a higher universal.
They're completely getting rid of their tax compliance department. So if you're a big business here, everyone who's running a business with 10, 20, 50, 100, they know how exponentially their tax compliance department goes up, and then it gets too big to hold internally, and they've got to go to the big KPMGs and all the rest of it. That disappears. On the analysis that we've got here, we see tax compliance, like just the overhead for businesses, about 95% of their tax compliance obligations, like internal, just disappear. That's already itself a huge burden, and just the numbers of employees required to keep that ridiculous bus going, it's not required anymore. So business becomes easier. When you wipe out all these taxes in this nation, it's not the only nation that's done it. Go and visit Dubai, go and visit Qatar.
I was going to raise those,
The term you start having to apply to Western Australia moving to this post-secession model is it's a free tax zone. It's a free trade zone.
Yep.
That brings in even more business, getting back to your self-sufficiency, how do we get stuff, businesses will be knocking on the door.
And small business will be able to flourish once
Absolutely.
again, rather than being taxed into submission by government.
That's right.
Obviously, that will greatly promote innovation as well.
Yes.
So the future for WA is very bright.
Yes. When the state becomes its own sovereign nation and essentially relieves itself of the Commonwealth burden, and it's not just hemorrhaging money out the back door, well, straight away you've got all this additional cash as an administration. Now, we fixed, in our model anyway, we fixed this universal royalty rate on the miners, only the miners who pay this 20%, okay? It's enough to essentially have a neutral budget every single year, okay? But when all companies, all businesses in this new nation are paying no income tax, and so in other words, they've got all this additional capital, that means they can reinvest it into all the great ideas that they have. Now, every successful business owner is full of a million ideas, It's like, but the bank's not going to extend it to me. We haven't got enough cash flow, all those simple arguments because of the burden, right?
The suppression,
the oppression. Let me stop for a second. They created this nation as a penal colony, right? And the way they did that was you're in, physical change, and you were required to labour hard. Well, they changed that model where everyone didn't have the chains on them anymore. But what this Commonwealth government particularly has perfected is continuing the penal model, but using money and taxes.
Debt slavery.
And so we have still a penal nation where everyone's supposedly free. But no, you've got a gazillion legal obligations to pay a gazillion taxes to a Commonwealth government, which isn't delivering anything to the people of Australia. So it's still a penal nation. You go to a new nation, Western Australia, you remove all that penalising financial servitude. The oppression's completely lifted. So all these businesses get to invest in all these ideas that have held them back. And that's part of what we call the self-sufficiency chapter here. And some examples include, there's this incredible area of land in the north of WA, the Kimberley, the famous Kimberley. It's just such a beautiful area. That has rainfall, which we all know. What's the big lake up there? It's Eyre?
Lake Eyre.
Lake Eyre. It's an enormous lake, right? An enormous lake. Every year, there's tremendous monsoonal rains, fresh water, which just is allowed to run off and dry up. We did the modelling, and it's like, hold on, we can capture the equivalent of 1/3 of Lake Eyre every single year up in that region, and not only pipe it down to the middle of the state, but turn all the Kimberley and the Pilbara green.
So you're reimagining the infrastructure of the state or the new nation.
Yes.
And an ability to develop it.
It's to develop it for export markets, but it's to provide food self-sufficiency. There is 1/3 of Lake Eyre water available every single year to create, it's an explosion in market gardening. And so that has all these follow-on effects. And so if you're going to do that, have these giant new reservoirs of water, well, what can you do with those reservoirs? We can lay floating voltaic panels on top of them. So everyone hates the panels when they're put across a desert landscape and they don't look so sightly. But when you've just got a body of water that's sitting there as a reservoir to supply new farmlands, well, to save evaporation.
I was about to say,
it gets very hot,
which is huge.
Yeah, no, we looked at the numbers. Yeah. When you cover them with floating voltaic panels, solar panels.
Yep.
Well, then you start to get an extraordinary amount of energy generated. And the modelling that we've gone through here is that we get to a situation where, and it's quite affordable too, that we can generate so much with the solar with a bit of gas input from the Northwest Shelf that electricity can be supplied to all businesses and residential homes for cost plus annual CPI increases. So that in effect, in simpler terms, that means the current electricity bill that you see will be reduced immediately 40%.
It's quite amazing. So not the $250 we're going to get back every year from Albo. That's really interesting, Julian. So your book launch, you and your co-authors are launching this book on Friday the 13th of March. A very interesting date indeed.
Yeah.
How do people come along to that event to learn all about that? Because we've only covered a very small portion of this book.
Yep.
It goes into complete detail. And I'm sure anyone who picks this up and reads it will really get a solid feel for what you're proposing.
Well, the book only went live last Sunday, available via our website, which is www.secessionwabook.shop. So it's Secession WA book, one word, .shop.
And we'll put this up on the screen.
Thank you. But yes, pardon me, we do have the book launch on Friday the 13th, and we won't mucking around when we pick that date. People are going to bag this idea that's like, let's go all in and blow off the superstition, because secession isn't a superstition. It's something that we can grab.
It's very tangible.
Very tangible. So we'll blow off the naysayers. So Friday the 13th, they can go to humanitics.com and pick up tickets there. It's over at the Armstrong Pavillion, which is in Dalkeith, which is centrally located. It's a very good venue, great parking and facilities.
Amazing parking. I can tell everyone that for a fact.
It's surrounded by football fields and grounds, and so it's quiet. It's a nature outlook. And so there's a variety of tickets available there. There's general admission plus a copy of the book. The books, the hard copy, they're $90. It's as cheap as we could do them. But if you buy one of the tickets, it's only $70. Then there's another, which is general admission plus an online discount. I think the discount's $20 off an online purchase of either the hard copy paperback or the digital version, or there's general admission for $20. So
there's no reason why everyone can't get along to that.
Yeah. Now, you said, that night's going to be with Professor William Coleman. He provides one of the forewords. He'll be explaining how much of a balls up it was, WA getting involved in the Commonwealth back in the early 1900s. As I mentioned, he's written a book or two on this subject, just so people are clear that there was a lot of strong arming, there were a lot of promises made that weren't kept, and there was a lot of regret by the political WA leaders. Then G.G. Foster comes on, so she headed the economics in the book. She helped fix my economics because I drafted a lot of those chapters, and then she and Michael Baker came in as the experts they are and said, that needs to be changed here and changed there. And they were confident enough to stick with the whole project and put their names to it and say, this works. So Gigi is going to speak to those, how it just broadly it works. Then I'll be having a speak for a little while, 20 minutes or so, just probably the legal issues, because some people will be a little bit, can we do this legally or not? And just to make it clear, it's possible, and why wouldn't you?
I'm all for it. I am all for it.
And Rebecca Barnett will close the night out with a Q&A and questions from people and attendants. So the pickets are starting to sell at a good clip, and we've got an interesting array of people turning up from some pretty high-powered WA academics who are interested in attending as well to hear more.
And is this will there be another event? Like, this is the first event. You've already got the book sales going, but...
Yeah, well, we haven't had time to plan anything else. We're trying to lock in the 13th, or days around that time, because Gigi is back here in Perth, and she's only here for about a week or so, and she's going on sabbatical from UNSW. And so a few days after the Perth event on the Friday, she'll be going overseas for a period of time because she's got commitments over there. Whether we can get up another event, I'm not quite sure. We perhaps have an opportunity to get around the state for that.
I've got a funny feeling that this is going to generate a lot of discussion in the state. Okay, everybody. Well, I hope that tantalised you enough to go straight online and buy a ticket. We'll put all the details in the description below, so please check that out. Julian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the hard work that you and others have put into this. I know that you've put in, did you say a year and a half? Really?
Yeah, look, I had the calling to get to WA because I just understood there was going to be a solution. And I was going to discover it in WA, and I left the East Coast at the end of June of 2024. And it was once I hit Port Hedland in August of 2024, that's when the penny dropped.
Yeah.
And so the research has been ongoing. There was some interruptions because we still had the final parts of our COVID stuff to deal with and challenges with the current Prime Minister. In fact, we were sending him several letters about what was going on inside those vaccines. So we had to tidy that business up, square it away. And then I returned to it.
And you're on to this new thing now. Everyone, again, I hope that really piqued your interest. Go online, buy a copy or get a ticket for this event. Again, the details will all be there in the description below. And thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, this is a very important subject. I'd really appreciate if you share the video and join Oratalks. Oratalks is sponsoring the event on the night. Please participate in spreading the word. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.